So today I wanted to briefly explore why sometimes you don't engage with a film or a TV series that you think you really should like. It's got all the components, however, for some reason you just can't get into it. So they're doing a remake of the film Dune, and I'm going to look at 1984's version and try and understand why I couldn't get into it at first. So one of my friends really likes the original Dune film. So I decided to re-watch it. Because when I first watched it, I just couldn't concentrate. I don't think I even finished it the first time round. Felt guilty and watched it again, but still struggled the second time around. Here we are many years later, and I'm going to give it another go. So initially, let's do the positives. It's got great visuals. And a soundtrack by Eno, all good. But the real problem is the screenplay is terrible. I appreciate that you need some exposition for world building in a pure sci-fi film such as this. The princess at the beginning was the perfect setup. She told us what was happening. So I say let the story begin. But no, the exposition in the next scene with the emperor, and then with the lead character, and then with who I'm calling the Boil Man. 3 expositions in a row, 3 scenes. It's too much. I'll give you an example. Special Agent Dale Cooper from Twin Peaks is talking to Captain Jean-Luc Picard. They talk in great detail about the sandworms. But later, a giant sandworm destroys the base that Dale Cooper goes to. During the scene, you only needed some supporting dialogue like, "The worm has picked up the vibrations. The ones I've seen are only 150 feet. That must be..." And another character kicks in, "400 feet, but I've seen even bigger." All done during the action, when we can actually see the worm, rather than stood in a room talking about it. So this is a real obvious show not tell. These are absolute basics. Another thing that I always struggle with is introducing too many characters too quickly. Especially when you're at the start and you're trying to get into it and hang on to a character to lead you into the story. And that's normal practice. You do it from one character's point of view, so at least there's a common factor, rather than a string of unrelated scenes and characters. I mean, the narrating princess at the beginning, she could have done this a bit later on. She was already introduced. So one of the positives I said right at the very beginning is there's some beautiful visuals within this film, especially for the time, 1984. However, sometimes a director can be too proud of these beautiful sets. And again, within this film, there's too many silent scenes with somebody just walking through. They could have at least had some interesting movement or a bit of action or even some dialogue whilst they walk through these beautiful sets. And as the film looked good and the world building was rich and deep, this only contrasted with the dialogue and character development, which was often one-dimensional. It made the delivery of the lines and the dialogue itself seem monotone, so therefore unbelievable to us as an audience. And as a consequence, we are then less interested or engaged in what happens to that character, or even what they're actually saying. Now, this is no reflection on the actor's ability. Sadly, it is down to the director. And I hate saying so because I'm a fan of this director. Good sci-fi is a very careful balance. It takes a little bit of real world, a lot of imagination, and sometimes not taking itself too seriously. I give you Blade Runner as the benchmark of getting the balance right. However, there are 1 or 2 places in that film where the pacing is a little slow, but I still love it. And I've mentioned before about the world building scenes. And there's a famous one within this, where there's a crushing of a bug creature into a drink. And as this action really helps you build up the characters in the world, it doesn't mean that you stop the film just to show it. You can incorporate it whilst developing the story, or when something else is happening. Again, this is simple story beat stuff. So I'm not good at doing my homework, but I did a real little bit of research on the screenplay of this film, because that's where I think the issue was. And it was written by David Lynch, who's normally really cool. I mean, he's done some really interesting stuff, some really experimental stuff that has moved into the mainstream. However, he admits that he did not have total control of this movie, and he had to cut the final edit down from 4 hours to 2. And that might explain the slow start or the fragmented start, because once the action starts in this film, if you make it that far, it's then a reasonable film. It's just, will the audience stay? David Lynch also went on to say that he ended up shooting additional scenes to make it work, to fit all the pieces together. Now, this is purely my opinion and my own speculation, but I can imagine in the corporate boardroom them going something like, David, you need to put a line in about this here or there to explain what's happening, unless Joe Public will not know what's going on. I mean, I haven't got a clue. And I think, of course you don't, Mr. Executive. The film's not for you. It's for me and others like me. So now I understand about screenwriting a little bit more than I did when I first watched this. I think I understand why I don't engage with this movie. And that's helped me in the rewatch, because I was at least able to critique it from that view or that focus.